So, welcome to our hybrid panel discussion. We are all here because we are interested in what you would call hybrid screaming, hybrid phonation, stuff that might or might not fit into that category. So let's do a little round of introductions. Marcel, you want to start?
Okay, sure, why not? My name is Marcel Weidenauer. I'm a vocal coach and I focus mainly on screaming and singing with vocal effects. So metal vocals and also rock vocals. Excited about the exchange about hybrids. I can do a hybrid of sorts myself. I've discovered it, I think, Tony, correct me, maybe half a year ago. So I'm still a beginner at it, but yeah, I'm curious to show and to learn.
Cool. Corinna, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Corinna Koschatka. I'm from Hamburg, and I've been doing normal vocals, let's say clean vocals, for 20 years and rough vocals for 5 years. Yes, and I'm only here because Tony invited me. We met at last year's Harsh Vocal Camp of Britta. And I wasn't aware that I do hybrid techniques, so but Tony told me so, and that's why I'm here.
Cool. Arnaud.
Okay. So I'm a vocal coach and singer, mainly in rock and metal aesthetics, clean vocals and harsh vocals too. I work a lot with Tony and Marcel. I think I've been working with Tony for almost 5 years now. I'm interested in those hybrid screams because I probably can do things that are approaching it, but I'm not sure at all if I'm not sure about what it is. So I think we had to talk about it to gather data and examples just to know what we are talking about, because I think it's an important topic.
Cool, we're going to do that. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Tony. I work with Marcel and Arnaud in the Sing and Scream network, and as you might know, I'm quite nerdy about categorizing vocal effects, the voice in general. my current model of the voice knows 2 or maybe 3 main vocal fold-based vocal effects. Creaking, fry stuff, if you will, grunt, false chord stuff, if you will, splitting, if that's interesting to the context, but that's it so far. And now suddenly we find that we can do stuff that feels like one thing, but sounds or behaves like the other. Or we can have stuff that feels and sounds and behaves like an in-between of these stations. And for a long time, I have tried emulating certain sounds either via the fry route or the false chord route. And I think I've gotten reasonably close, but then every now and then I meet people who do something that's different. That's the actual thing, not the thing I'm trying to get close to, but what we could call a hybrid, because it doesn't fit in either the false chord or the fry category so neatly. And yeah, all of these people here are people I met at some point in my journey, and all of you can do hybrids better than I can, so I want to learn from you. And I think we can accumulate quite a lot of interesting info today. So, Arnaud, you said you'd be interested in defining a hybrid first. I already gave a bit of a vague definition right now. What would you say is a hybrid?
I would say that it's a kind of intermediary coordination between the creaky vibration pattern and the grunty vibration pattern. So, not to seem too nerdy at first, I think it deals with probably the airflow. So there's a certain quantity of airflow that produces a sound, something like that, or something like that. And there's an in-between position here that seems the underlying vocal fold vibration of a couple of screams. And I said that I don't know what it is, because sometimes I have sounds that have been identified by you guys as hybrid screams, and they just seem to me quite pushed fry screams, so something that has a creaky underlying strategy.
So it seems that we have coordinations that kind of sound and behave and feel like a pushed fry scream, for example.
Yeah.
So creaking based, but something about them is off, to really put it in the pushed fry direction. Something about them urges us to call it hybrid. Can you give an example of something like that?
I'd say, first of all, to define it verbally, maybe I have a sensation of less resistance in terms of glottal impedance, you know. So, for example, if I grunt, it's basically, you know, flags in the air, in the wind. If I do something like that, it's a bit more resistant. If I do what is called a hybrid, I will first try to have that kind of puberty transition, something a bit like that. And it would sound a bit like that.
Cool.
And obviously, if I do it in a more less pushy way, it will sound probably a bit more restrained. And if I do it in a more grunty way, it will seem less restrained and with more airflow. Something like that, for example.
Can you give all of the examples with a bit more distance to the mic so they don't clip?
Sorry. So my false chord. Okay. So that would be the grunty stuff. The hybrid stuff would be. Okay. And fry scream stuff would sound this way.
Cool. Could you show a transition from false chord to hybrid to fry?
Okay, I can probably do something from fry to hybrid. So let's try. Okay, that's I think the transition was good. Now from grunt to hybrid, I would try. Never tried. Yeah. No.
Marcel is giving a funny look. Marcel, what do you think?
Yeah.
Do you have the same thought as me?
I thought both are hybrid. So you didn't go. I think you didn't go from grunt to hybrid, but you started in hybrid.
Oh yeah. So I would just try to prepare my grunt because grunting is not my natural thing. I've never been a really good grunter. So okay, that's my grunt. Hybrid,
Yeah.
more or less.
So I think we have 4 sounds in the room now. We have a pure grunt, false chord scream, very loose, very meaty like that. Then we have a more grunty hybrid, the one you transitioned in from grunt now. Then we have a more fry-like hybrid, the one that you transitioned into from your fry scream. And then it would be interesting just to see what happens if you could try to go through all of these 4 stages. And if it fails, that will give us very interesting info too.
I would try from one side, I would try it from the other side afterwards, okay?
Cool. So we hear 4 stages.
Yeah. Awesome.
They're very, very close to each other, so I can totally imagine a smooth transition there.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And now from the other side. Okay. I can't transition to grunt.
Yeah, there's probably not enough
Grunt,
air
right?
left.
Yeah. Can you give us some insight into how the airflow compares? So what I find quite interesting is when you do your high grunt that you've shown us for the transition, how does that compare airflow wise with the hybrid? Do you lose the same amount of air or do you lose less air when doing the hybrid?
Simple. It's very simple. So I would say the more airflow is grunt.
There's more airflow in the grunt.
Yeah. Then hybrid, then fry. That's why I was saying that I believe it is aerodynamically related, and the state of the sound is a function of the resistance of the vocal tract. So the more the resistance, the more I have the feeling to be towards fry scream.
Yeah. What role does the pitch inside or the
Interesting.
mode or I recall when you started with grunt, you started lower, and then when you wanted to get closer to the hybrid, there was this distinct appearance of if we talk in CVT terminology, you may go from neutral to like a curbing or like a reduced edge, or does that play no role at all?
I think it's playing a role, and it's probably to deal with vocal fold adduction.
Yeah, yeah, that you're going more metallic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's adding resistance. And you also probably noticed that to find my hybrid comfort zone, I have to go towards that M1, M2 transition. You know, that kind of puberty,
yeah.
yodeling, goofy voice. And I think it answers to your question. I have to shout out loud into that transition, as if calling someone in despair.
can you show us?
Okay, you hear?
So it's really and not
No.
Yeah.
Cool. This is so interesting because I work a lot with these yodels too.
Yeah.
For medium fry,
Yeah.
right? Medium fry I define as an instability-based fry scream. So I do a lot of puberty noises too, but I always advise people to not break into a breathy falsetto like that,
Yeah.
because otherwise it might get pushy. It might either become a pure pushed fry scream or a medium fry that is decentered in the push direction. So I want people to have a very clear either head voice or heady mix depending on how you define it. And interestingly, exactly that rule does not apply to hybrid. So now the question is not only what's the difference between a fry scream and a hybrid, but specifically between a pushed fry and a hybrid. Where's the line? Is the line just if it hurts, it's a pushed fry, if it doesn't hurt, it's a successful hybrid? Or what's the
I
inherent
really
difference?
it's an interesting question, and I really think that there's a very, very close relationship between the two, because to me, I found that sound while searching for a more pushed approach or less compressed approach, I would say. I really wanted to have a kind of flow sensation. So a resistance that was entirely felt at the level of vocal folds, not at the level of supraglottic structures. Flow is just blowing out air and it doesn't resist. I would say push when I actively make an effort to push air outside. And for me, for example, grunt is more pushed. I mean, breathy grunt. I really actively push air. And the sound I demonstrated here is not pushy at all. It is just fucking loud, really, really loud. It's the loudest scream I can make. I think I can't make it louder, otherwise it starts to be uncomfortable.
Cool. So
it's the max.
maybe there's a pushed hybrid too that goes beyond the volume level of a pushed fry because it's hybrid
probably.
and not fry. Yeah.
Probably,
so that's
but
cool.
I don't want to test it because I need my voice to make a living.
Yeah, we all do. I think this would be an interesting moment to hear another example. Corinna, do you want to try giving a demonstration of your scream?
Which feels like a normal false chord.
Yes, it feels like a false chord and suddenly sounds more like EL screaming, shouting stuff you would expect in an emo context, even though it's achieved differently.
We can try it.
Cool. It's very loud and it distorts,
Yes.
but it sounds very good.
It's super loud and it feels like it's in my head register,
Yeah.
and it also feels like there is a lot of airflow. Also, my feeling is I cannot really control the airflow.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I should recommend this.
Well, how's the sensation? Is it comfortable?
For a bit of time, yes, but after half an hour, it feels like there's a lot of tense inside.
Okay. So this is interesting because usually when people do stuff that's inherently inefficient, they feel it much faster than after 30 minutes. So the question is that tension that you describe coming from the scream itself, or maybe from the articulation, maybe from trying to sing long phrases that this kind of hybrid isn't perfect for because it has a very high airflow and you have to take big breaths and then so you're working a lot, but the vocal folds themselves maybe actually might not care. So that's the interesting question always when we have signs of inefficiency. Is it an inherently inefficient coordination, or is it slightly off in the context where it's being used, right?
Good question, yeah.
Can you maybe show us the way you found that. So Arnaud talked about yodeling, and then pushing into that or going loud while doing that.
Well, I always thought I only do normal false chords. So I think my band and me, we created a new song, and there I tried to sing lower than I normally
Yeah.
do. And then it just happened because I tried to let down my
Larynx,
yeah. So and
larynx,
then it
larynx.
simply happened. I don't know.
You changed the vocal tract setting, and
Yeah.
that changed the way the vocal folds work. So
Yeah.
you changed the resistance, you changed the back pressure.
Yes, yes. It feels like if I normally do my false chord, it feels like I need to tighten more the throat, and it feels like I would sing in my chest voice, yeah, classically, and this one is more in the head voice register.
Cool. I have the video from Harsh Vocal Camp, and I'm gonna
Mm.
share my screen. So this is nerding out after a metal concert that Britta Goetz invited all of us to, and that was the origin of the hybrid panel idea.
Geil, kannst du mal auf Wow! Kannst du doch auf Wu? Ja, Wu. Und auf I. Und jetzt Iau. So geil.
How was the audio? Was it tolerable?
It's okay.
Hey, it was really good. What became apparent to me is the break. I think very similar to what Arnaud is doing.
Yeah.
Can you maybe, for completion's sake, I'd really like to hear what happens if you go down in pitch. The pitch is really high, right? Can you do just a slide down in pitch? And maybe if it starts to feel uncomfortable or pushy, back down a little bit with the volume. Does
Okay.
that work?
Like this?
We could hear the grunt in the end.
Yeah.
Did it
It's
feel
more
comfortable
quiet.
when going down, when going back down with the volume?
Yes, it was comfortable. I
Yeah.
only felt like, okay, it's just not really there because it's so quiet and it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like there's just, yeah, anything.
When you're going back down, it goes into grunt.
Mm.
So that's a nice connection. That's basically the same thing Arnaud tried, but now we combine it with a downward pitch glide, right? I remember when we worked on False Chord Scream a couple of years ago in an online lesson, and we didn't really go for a super useful sound right away. We went for more of a sighing noise, if you remember that one. Like this, which you could argue whether that already qualifies as a false chord scream or whether it's just the grunt that you build the false chord scream on. But can you give us a demo of this one? See, that's a very pure grunt, right? That's not a hybrid yet. So, can you try once again? Wow, your hybrid into that very grunty, sighy, low thing.
Oh, I lost the air.
Yeah. Maybe the other way around. Can you go from the low grunt to the hybrid?
Oh my God, the air is just flowing out. Yeah.
That was really clear to me.
Mm.
What do you think, Marcel?
I think there's a distinction between Corinna going into grunt from that. I like to refer to it as kind of under-twanged or too dark and dull voice, like like the ape. And from where she does her hybrid, because in her first try where it didn't work, we could very clearly hear that it's somewhat metallic. Uh, uh, it's more like that. And as she went down, she didn't find into grunt because she didn't, go into that really dull, undertranked spot. So I'd say it's possible to do a glide if you also change placement or change mode with the voice to somewhat metallic. But if you don't do that, especially when going down, it doesn't work. So the distinction might be that her hybrid is somewhat metallic and her grunt is not metallic.
I think so too, and you
What do
can
you
also
think
hear
about
that
that?
in
Yeah.
the Harsh Vocal Camp video where we start on more of this kind of belty setting. I want to invite two more people to introduce themselves. First, Aliki Katriou, who just joined the meeting. Do you want to unmute yourself and tell us a couple of sentences about you and what you think about the word hybrid?
Hi, I exist. Is the statement about me. No.
The situation is just never getting better, and they're talking about progress and they're talking about me. They talk about helping and they talk about family. Talk about their mental health and talk about money. They talk about disorders and they talk about trauma. Talk about equality and talk about their needs. They talk about identity and talk about desire, and where the fuck does that leave me? This world is nothing for swine, and we pay their voice. Our culture curating, westernized, we mold into nothing. My apocalypse is near. I can feel the end coming here.
Am I saying something more profound than I exist?
No, that's perfect.
Fantastic.
You're gonna
Great.
say more in a minute, I'm sure. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself? And yeah, I'm gonna let you.
Yeah. Hey guys, are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Is my mic working? Awesome. What's up, guys? Yeah, I'm Matt. I'm one of Tony's students. Pretty new to vocals. I've been doing vocals for like a year, mostly working on harsh vocals. And yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for being here. So, I know that you can do some pretty interesting hybrids. I also know that you cannot be loud today. Can you show us a couple of clips?
Yeah, so I guess I'll share the on-topic one first. And kind of similar to, I think I had a similar approach to finding this one as Corinna. So I just put a Google Drive link in the chat. So when me and Tony talked about this, he basically said this is likely like a pushed fry technique. And yeah, it kind of has like that fry white noise, but it's super voicey, very loud. Yeah, like definitely the loudest thing I do. And unfortunately, this clip was like a couple days after I discovered it. So, and then I've had some vocal issues due to like acid reflux and stuff since then. So I haven't been able to like refine it and play with it too much. So, but I started with a very similar approach of like just starting with like a false chord, just a very false chord scream and like, just messing around with the true fold pitch and then kind of stumbled on this. So that's kind of how I found it.
Cool. So what would you call this one? You would call it fry shouts or medium fry maybe, and now you would call it pushed fry, right?
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of your descriptions there.
Cool.
Shut up when I'm talking to you! Shut up! Shut up when I'm talking to you! Row! 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 Yeah! Yeah! Whoa! Yeah! What the fuck is good?
Cool. Any thoughts in our panel about whether that is on the fry side or whether we already qualify that as hybrid?
I would say that's a hybrid. We can hear a gruntish quality in that, but at the same time, it is from a metallic setting. Wah, 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 wah. It's kind of that, but for the pitch that we are at, so F sharp 4, it's pretty loud, and I would say we can't get a medium fry with this quality. Whoa, 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 whoa! Tony, you're better at medium fry than me. But if I recall correctly, that range is just not very powerful with medium fry, and we can maybe push a bit into that. But yeah, from what I heard, I would say that that is a hybrid and not a medium fry.
Yeah, it's definitely not a medium fry. I apparently called it a push fry when we first talked about it. And the interesting thing for me is I can make that sound. I can also approximate a lot of these hybrid sounds, at least after a couple of attempts. But all of that to me feels like either a push fry or another variation of fry with an aspect of pushing, whether it be pushed medium fry or pushed hyper compressed, or like a false chord scream that I bring to very high ranges. So if I've done hybrids in my life before, they have been accidentally good attempts in a series of not so good attempts. So that's interesting. Not just the question of how do we achieve that sound, but also how do we achieve it comfortably. Matt, can you tell us whether that specific clip felt comfortable?
Yeah, so this is one of those, and again, I haven't had too much time to like refine it, unfortunately. So a lot of, well, I'll just say it like this. It's comfortable when I'm doing it, but it definitely has like a pretty fair amount of like vocal strain that gets induced, I guess. Like not too bad. I think I did it like primarily that technique for maybe like half an hour one time, and like that was kind of when I was like, all right, need to stop, need to take a break. But nothing like major, no change in my speaking voice or anything like that. Yeah.
So the interesting stuff is similar to what we discussed with Corinna before. Is that strain coming because of the inherent nature of the effect, or is it coming because you're trying lyrics? Shut up when I'm talking to you. That's a lot of consonants.
Right.
You have a musical intention, right? So the question is, if you can do that for 30 minutes at all, what are you doing better than I am doing? Because I cannot imitate that sound for 30 minutes. While it's probably not perfect yet, and we can hear it, it has its inconsistencies, obviously, something about it is right.
Yeah, so as I started to get better at it, I had a little more longevity with it so in that clip, it's like very open, like not much resistance. And I found a way to make it a little bit more compressed, but still really pushy. But like it kind of felt like the more compressed I made it, the less strenuous it was in terms of like vocal strain, I guess, depleting my vocal meter. It feels a little more effortful, when you compress it a little bit more, but it feels a little more sustainable. So there's kind of like a slightly more compressed setting, I guess, that you could put on it that seemed to make it work a little bit better. So that's what I was doing when I was able to do it for like half an hour.
Cool. Arnaud has asked in the chat what happens if you sing a high-pitched brassy false chord. Arnaud, do you mean high-pitched in the sense of or in the sense of sound color?
Now, for example, if I do something like I just tested a couple of things, and I just noticed that if I try to sing, basically if I try to belt a note and blending the belt with a false chord scream, which probably sounds something very stupid to do, it turns into what we are calling an hybrid scream.
Cool. Can you show us?
Oh yeah. So I dial down my preamp here. If I do something like, which is false chord, it sounds like that.
So that's this range, right?
Yeah.
Can you show us the underlying coordination clean so that we hear whether it's But it's interesting, in order to become clean, you had to reduce your twang, right? It was like, ah.
Yeah, probably. It seemed quite twangy too. But
Aliki, what do you think?
I'm very suspicious that that isn't the underlying sound and coordination. I feel like too many parameters are shifting and then it's shifting into a different coordination, and that's not what's underneath that scream.
Yeah, do you also hear less twang in the clean one?
Yeah.
oh yeah,
What
yeah,
else?
probably. But also because if I twang, I mean that kind of very twangy thing is also the way I'm probably finding the distortion. And if you remember well my endoscopies, I have a squeezing machine. So there's probably a different geometry of the vocal tract at this moment. But I'm talking not about the anatomical process here, but just I'd say the cognitive path that I'm taking to have that kind of sound. And I think it will be really difficult for me to have a false chord scream which sounds really false chordish at this high pitch and with that kind of brassy tone. It tends to turn immediately into something that sounds more like a fry scream, so more resistance, a kind of smaller grain, sandpaper structure, if I can express it this way, and less, turbulent. It sounds less like that. You don't have that kind of. If I try to keep that sound at a high pitch, I can't keep it. I have to change something, and it changes the sound. Am I clear, or am I giving too many informations at the same time?
No, people can rewatch.
Okay.
This is a nerdy place. We don't dumb down. Cool. We have another example to listen to.
Oh yeah.
We have a 35-second scream by Matt. This is interesting because while we hear the atonality going in and out, or the tonality going out and in, if you will, we hear moments of what to me sounds like this, like a false chord. Then we hear moments that sound like a rattle or something like that. And then we also hear these little yodeling moments in there. So that's interesting. That's something that if I want to emulate that sound, I do with false chord and my air is gone after less than 10 seconds. How the fuck did you do that?
Yeah, so yeah, that one was interesting. So like the very first scream I kind of learned how to do and taught myself was just like a really like, you know, I guess we'd call it like a hyper compressed fry scream, and I'll try to, you know, something like that kind of that I found through like, you know, taking like a compressed like false chord distortion on like, you know, like grid singing kind of thing, like and just making it even tighter until I was like, oh, that kind of sounds screamy, right? So that was the first thing I learned, and then separately, I started learning false chord, more of like a, you know, very rumbly, rattly kind of thing, you know, breathy sound. And then at some point, I kind of realized they were like actually compatible, and so the way I found that tone is by I basically just took the hyper compressed fry scream and I just tried to open it up a little bit while also trying to get like the rumble that I feel in my false chord scream going, and I realized I could do those things together, and it made it louder and more, I guess, a little less rumbly, a little more fry-ish, but also, you know, made it use like way less airflow than a normal false chord. It's definitely quieter than my normal false chord though, so that's how I found that one.
Thank you, because I have found something to study here. Trying different things while you were giving your explanations. Basically, what you explained here, if I did understand what you say, that you try to make a kind of combo thing between the low rumbling false chord and the sensation of the low hyper-compressed fry scream. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
We have another example of the same thing by Arnaud's student Joseph. So I'm gonna share the audio. So that was the first one, and the second one.
Après, je peux le faire à un peu plus haute intensité, moins longtemps, mais c'est différent. Là, je sais pas combien du tout de temps je tiens, mais ça fait plus.
Arnaud, can you translate what Joseph said?
He said that the first clip is quite low intensity. The second one has more intensity to it.
Cool. Matt, would you say this is the same technique that you're using?
It sounds very similar. The first one sounded less hybridy and just more hyper compressed, but the second one sounded like pretty similar. Like he's approaching it pretty much the same way, I would say.
Cool. And it has a similar airflow apparently. So even though we have a more consistent quality maybe in Joseph's scream, we can hear that you're doing something very similar. We hear a similar timbre, we hear moments of similar texture, and you describe similar strategies, right? Marcel, do you have some thoughts about how you would categorize this one? If it's a hybrid, which kind of hybrid is it? How will we call that one?
I'm a little split whether Arnaud's student and Matt do the same thing, or whether they have just the same setting, but one is doing grunt. In that Matt is doing grunt in that hyper-compressed setting, and Giuseppe is doing hyper-compressed fry in that setting.
I don't hear
I
a pure
recall-
hypercompressed fry.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm quite good at hypercompressed fry, and I don't get it as brutal as that. It's like
I can do something. Yeah.
that pitch. So now we have another sound.
Compressed?
Yeah.
That's another one.
That's another one,
Maybe,
yes.
maybe that's just. I'm pretty interested in what you think, but I think this is close to Giuseppe, but it's not close to Matt. We heard Matt describe how he does it, so if I recall correctly,
It is not that close
a
to.
compressed
it is-
setting and then.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but I think there's a massive difference between the first Joseph clip and the second one. When he thinks he add more intensity to the sound, and I think, and I quite agree with you on the second clip, that it sounds a bit more fryish. But the first one, I don't know if Tony can play it again, just for you to
Yeah.
really listen
Yeah.
to, especially the fundamental note and the rolling quality that lies behind. It's really interesting.
What fundamental do you hear, Arno? Can you hum it?
Yeah,
But that's a very low fundamental, and in pure hypercompressed fry, I cannot do that.
Maybe more than the other one. I'm pretty bad at catching the right octave when
I don't think
the
it's
sound
the
is
high one.
ready.
The high one I can do. It's
Yeah, me too. Me too. So I think it's the low one, and there's, if you hear it also, there's something very interesting, which seems to be a kind of very slight air leak, a bit the same, a bit like the one you find in those, hyper compressed splitting settings. Something like that up there. I don't know if it occurs, but this is something I hear.
what do you think, Marcel?
I'm a proponent of it being the octave up, but it's not this setting, but it's more closer to a dark edge. If I get, I need a little bit of practice, but I recall some clips sending you, Tony, where I could get the balance of hypercompression and edge right to get a very similar sound. I'm very certain with Matt that there's grunt in it, because we could hear these kind of breaks inside. We can't hear it with Joe.
I have another clip with a fundamental.
Yeah.
I have to send it to you.
Okay.
But just before I play it, Aliki, which pitch do you hear so we can place bets?
So I don't know. I'd need to hear it again, because for me the most disturbing quality of the sound is the high frequency that sounds like a whisper. Like there's a really strange, annoying of air that's it bugs me. Like it really bugs me. It's the most annoying part of the sound and the most interesting part, and it makes me wonder how tense / stiff the vocal folds are in whichever coordination they're in. That.
Cool. Let's listen to another annoying clip where we hear the fundamental pitch.
Après, je peux le faire à un peu plus haute intensité et moins longtemps, mais c'est différent. Là, je sais pas combien du tout de temps je tiens, mais ça fait plus.
I have video too. I can share a video with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you permission to share.
Oh.
You should be able to now.
So there's the tongue position, obviously.
So that's interesting. It is the high pitch.
Oh.
And I think I have a video where it explains me how he does. And I will find it a couple of seconds.
I just want to chime in with something for what Marcel was doing. The grunt in the hypercompressed setting. I recognize that sound actually, and it's a little different from what I'm doing. I might be doing that plus a little more. Maybe there's more like TrueFold weirdness going on, a little fry stuff. But that sound you're doing sounds just like there was an old video from Phil Bozeman on his YouTube channel. It's like the guttural demonstration, and when he's like dissecting his technique a little bit, I'm pretty sure that's the exact sound he makes when he's like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing, but I kind of do this thing, and then like, go from there. So I just wanted to chime in with that really quick.
I appreciate being compared to Phil Bozeman. Thank you very much.
And for what it's worth, I
But
can't
I
isolate like that sound.
I think your setting is very similar to what I did, but I think you also had more airflow. So maybe just an element of pushing, of raising the volume even more, so that you weren't in creaking or in fry, but instead you were in grunt, truly. In the very end of your clip, we could hear you go back to creaking, if I recall that correctly. If we hear the Matt clip one more time, at the very end, when you just did these couple offsets, it sounded to me like you were returning to what I did, to that.
Okay, I can share the video where it tried to make me a tutorial. Okay, so I share it. So I'll translate too.
Pour essayer de décortiquer le false chord scream. Donc, bon, la base, je pars donc de false chord, donc de donc sur cette note-là, à peu près je le compresse vraiment beaucoup, donc en fait, c'est la forme de la bouche qui fait tout le truc.
And then the shape of the mouth.
Donc, je fais comme un U.
U.
Enfin, O-U, quoi. Et l'arrière de la langue vient vraiment coller contre le palais pour encore plus resserrer. Et c'est là...
So, the back of the tongue comes against the soft palate.
Toute la technique, c'est que la langue, elle vient faire comme ça.
And cupping with the tongue.
Puis comme ça. Sans éraillement, ça donnerait du style voilà. Et donc avec ça, ça fait voilà. Après, selon comme tu bouges.
Okay.
Do we hear a false chord scream in the beginning, Aliki?
Yes. I mean, my brain thinks this entire thing is false fold.
Okay, but when you say false fold, are you referring to just the ventricular folds themselves, or are you referring to a certain vocal fold coordination too?
I'm just referring to ventricular folds themselves at the moment.
And what are the vocal folds doing underneath that?
That's the magical question.
So I think we all agree the false folds are involved, and they're involved in most of these sounds. Arnaud has to leave, sadly. So, famous last words?
I would have liked to continue, but I think that I have to work. I have to work now, so Maybe I don't know. I will drop you a message. Maybe I have finished to work before this interesting meeting ends. I don't know.
Cool.
Cheers.
See
Have a
you.
nice weekend, all.
Yeah.
See you soon.
So I think we hear false fold involvement in all of these, but I think the interesting question is even the kind of vowel that we hear in the beginning that he calls fausse corde, right? Is that a grunt-based scream, or is it a hybrid-based scream, or is it hypercompressed fry? What is it?
I think I agree that it's there's a lot of false fold sound in that, but I think that it's creaking. We could call it a hybrid in the sense that it's one effect disguised as another, so that it is fry that sounds like a false chord scream, but in the moment where he explained, I think the compression or false fold part, he did it with a brighter coloring. He did it still on the low pitch, but he went into, I think, something like and then he colored it dark. And then only at that point, it really sounded very close to what we think of a false chord scream. But if so, what points me to I think why I think there must be vocal folds involved is he can hold it for really long. It sounds really complex. If it was only false folds, I think he would have lost air way sooner. And
I don't know
also,
if there is such a thing as pure false fold phonation. I've never seen it.
yeah. Okay, then maybe I misunderstood.
No, the question is basically, are the
yeah.
vocal folds doing, or are they doing?
At the latter, I'd say.
So it's more fry adjacent.
Yeah.
And maybe if he called it a fry scream and told me, well, I'm just trying to imitate the sound of a false chord or a death growl or whatever in a fry setting, I would have totally believed him. But the interesting thing is, he calls it a false chord scream. And it sounds like one, but it's 3 times as long as mine.
Yeah, and in that sense, I'd say we can call it a hybrid because it's one thing that sounds like the other. And maybe the vice versa would be what Corinna and Arnaud showed us. Things that maybe truly are false chord or grunt based, but that sound like fry screams or sound similar to a medium fry, so something that we heard from Matt.
So would it be possible to come up with a categorization or a classification of hybrids into, let's say, 3 main branches? We have screaming, big S. We have fry-based screaming or creaking-based screaming. We have false chord screaming or grunt-based screaming. We have hybrids, and then we could say that if we cannot really decide whether it's fry or hybrid, or it's leaning towards one side, we have a fry or creaking dominant hybrid. And similar to that, we have a false chord or grunt dominant hybrid. And then we also have a third thing that neither fits into any category. Maybe it's closer to one of the others, but it's still distinct insofar as that you might not be able to smoothly transition yet. Probably smooth transitions in all directions are possible, but the question is, do we have a hybrid on its own, like a hybrid, just for itself, or do we only have these two, and this in-between stage is only, a transitioning zone? Any thoughts?
I mean, I do have thoughts. In my mind, I guess in my mind, I draw a distinction between a physiological anatomical hybrid versus a resonance acoustic hybrid, where it's like it sounds like it's a hybrid, but it actually isn't. It's just borrowing the setting that you'd had, let's say, for Fry, and just doing pure false fold distortion, and then it ends up sounding weird. So I don't know where that one falls in this.
Well, if it sounds like Fry, but it's okay. So the question is, I think we have to go from the other side. Not what does it sound like, but first, what is it? What? at
Yes,
least
so
we
let's
assume-
say if it's false fold with relatively tight setup. So pharyngeal walls are narrowed, let's say it's twangy, whatever, the space is small, the larynx is lifted, and the airflow is relatively low. So the entire shape, let's say, would be something that people would habitually tend to do on Fry rather than false fold, and is something that you don't necessarily frequently hear on false fold.
Yeah.
But it's just false fold. Where is that?
Yeah, is it this one or is it this one? If we have a sound that's grunt based, but the shaping and the sound result and maybe also the behavior is more Fry-like, is that a Fry dominant hybrid or a false chord dominant hybrid?
If it's in the way it functions, if it's closer to grunt, I would say it's a grunt dominant hybrid.
So you define it based on
Yeah.
the vocal fold behavior,
Based on
not the
the
presentation.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we have this
Because
one.
that gives us big insights into how it works and also into how it would make sense to learn it. Though, of course, the downside is this makes it more confusing for the listener, right? That maybe hears something that sounds like Fry, but then is referred to as a grunt-based hybrid. So that would be the downside to that.
What if we just base it on this classification right now? Would you agree that Joseph's and Matt's examples are roughly in a similar spot, namely here, that we have some Fry-leaning vocal fold behavior presenting as a death growl? Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that. And
So
I would
that's
say
that.
that Matt's shouty screams
Yeah.
and Corinna's hybrids, and as well as what I can do somewhat, and I can show in a moment if you like to.
Yeah.
I would call that then the other thing. So a grunt hybrid.
Yeah, grunt-based hybrid, false chord dominant. So we're not decided on the actual terminology yet, but there's those two big containers. And now the question is, do we have hybrids that are neither grunt-based or creaking-based, presenting as the other, but distinctly their own vocal fold behavior? Does this one exist?
What was really impressive to me is how Arnaud moved from his Fry to hybrid and back. So maybe he can do something like that. Because I can't do anything that is this smooth or this close to any other coordination.
So you would say
I
that
found
yours
really-
is
really impressive.
yours is more here, right?
Yes, definitely.
Can you show
maybe
us?
I can. Yes. So the way. Let me just show a couple things, and then I'll talk about how to do it. Wait, is the original sound? Yes, it's on. Whoa! 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 I think about going into that is instability based. So either yodel or going back and forth between an overdrive and a curbing, or you could also call it chest and mix, something like this. And if I keep that volume going and hone in on that little break between the U vowel and the vowel, and push a little bit into it, so stay loud. I lost some more volume. I can get into that break. It's very easy though to push too much. So the distance between where it works and where it breaks well and where it feels pushed and uncomfortable is really thin. It's really thin. I can also reach that point if I yodel back from an overdrive to just, or from chest voice just to falsetto, similar to what Arnaud did. The important distinction, though, is that it doesn't feel how Corinna described it, like I'm truly in falsetto, or like I'm in falsetto, I'm in my head voice, but it feels the other way. It feels like I'm truly in chest voice. That's what it feels like. And if I lose the metal of chest voice, lose that placement, and instead truly go into falsetto, it becomes uncomfortable to me and it feels very pushed. So I don't think I can do something or the exact same thing that Corinna can do. Another access point would be staying in curbing and pushing into it, but just a tad. Let me show you. Or taking a really loud overdrive and going to curbing by changing the vowel, but without lowering the energy, even a tiny bit, but keeping the exact same energy going. That also works well for me. And that also helps avoiding the tendency to push and make it uncomfortable. Whereas when I try pushing into overdrive, that very often leads into it being pushed.
So that's interesting. Anytime I do my pushed fry demonstrations, I do them on open vowels, overdrive vowels. So maybe the distinction between the pushed fry and the hybrid is that when we are in that curbing setting, we have a tilted thyroid cartilage, and the laryngeal gesture that leads to a hybrid differs from the laryngeal gesture that I associate with the pushed fry, insofar as that the vocal folds are longer in that hybrid. Do you think that's a plausible theory?
I think it's possible. There is that distinct sensation of, I'm not sure if it's stretch or tilt, but there is, to maintain the hybrid and to have it not go into pushed or go into that falsetto or neutral territory where the same amount of volume or the same amount of energy would feel pushed and uncomfortable. To not have that happen, I need to maintain the sense of closure or a sense of glottal closure that I have when I do when I do both, right? When I lose that, I would go back into neutral. I need to maintain that tension while pushing into that metallic mode to maintain the hybrid and to not have it go close to pushed or to not have it go close to a grunt. So what you're describing with the tilt might be that sensation that I have of closure that I need to maintain that is distinctly lacking when I do when I do a grunt, albeit I'm quite bad at grunt. So maybe someone better at grunt like Arnaud can maneuver this much better. But to me, it feels like I do a grunt break, but with the distinct sensation of and another interesting point might be that there are, at least to me, there are kind of two intensity ways in which it can break. It can be somewhat subharmonic or just break a little bit. And it can break fully, very similar to how, also creaking would behave. And the higher I go, the more close I need to stick to the lighter break. And the fuller break that really feels like grunt, but just in a metallic setting, doesn't work anymore.
Would you say that the lighter break feels more similar to creaking or not?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It feels similar to creaking, but the difference is that I still have high airflow. So all of the hybrids that I've shown have very high airflow, and I can hold them for maybe 8 or 9 seconds. So the same amount of time that I can with the false chord. Whereas when I have any kind of creaking, that usually means I can hold it for longer than a normal note. Maybe so, like 25.
So maybe
30 seconds, maybe.
Maybe those three sounds you demonstrated, the grunt, the hybrid that feels like a grunt but sounds more like a fry scream, and the very high light hybrid, maybe those three categories explain quite well, coming back to the whiteboard, which doesn't show my categorization anymore. Hang on, give me a second. Maybe these three sounds would fit neatly into these three categories, where we have a pure grunt or false chord scream, something that feels like false chord but doesn't really sound like it, and something that is closer to fry already but still achieved from a false chord or grunty point. So truly in the middle. Does that make sense?
Yes. The further it goes into feeling basically just like false chord, the more airflow is happening and the faster I lose the air. And when I can get it really light, it feels almost just like a medium fry that has a bit more airflow going.
So medium fry is here. Pushed fry is here. Basic fry is here. And then there's non-compressed, compressed, as well as hyper-compressed variations of all of those. So we have quite a lot of sounds that could have an aspect of pushing, that could approach sounds like the ones we've heard, this kind of stuff. But only these three categories here we truly call hybrid. The true hybrid that is neither creaking nor grunt. So your lighter, higher up thing. Then a more grunty hybrid that might present as a fry but is achieved clearly from the false chord side. And a more creaky hybrid that might present as a false chord but behaves more like a fry in terms of airflow, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I wanna, if you can give me the screen share for a second, I can show some of the lighter hybrids in some recordings. That
Yes,
might
I will.
be interesting to get everybody's thoughts on that.
Go for it.
Okay. So, please everybody tell me if you can hear that. Yeah? All right. Okay, and also not from my audio, but the proper screen share audio. Okay, so this I call my normal hybrid. Right, that. And then we have a pretty full break, I think, here. Sorry, it's a WhatsApp audio. Breaking really fully. Here also from curbing. And here we have some that are much lighter, and these I can get way up higher. So this A flat was already pushing it, but these I can get to C5. So it's a really light break. Yeah, this. Yet the coordination underneath is also really light, maybe not even really metallic, but it sounds distinctly similar to well, this, but just less intense, more tonal, and also kind of close to Fry.
Yeah, the texture
last-
has
yeah.
become more crisp.
Yeah, yeah. And then lastly, I want to show I have some good audios of some subharmonic sounds with just, it's a female example. So first, it's a little bit subharmonic, and then it breaks fully. Right there. And I think I had even a better example here. And in every other context, I would say that is creaking. But I asked her about the airflow, and she told me she loses air really fast when that kicks in. And for comparison, here we have a take where she, I would say, lose that closure sensation of being in a metallic mode, being in curbing, and instead she goes into a grunt. Yeah. So yeah, thought these would be some interesting additions, and we also have some examples of compressed hybrids, something that Matt mentioned, where he told us that when he compresses it, it is more difficult to get the hybrid break or grunt break to happen, but it also makes it harder to go into the pushed side and have it be uncomfortable, and that is also something that I encountered. So this is somewhat compressed. We definitely have some distortion at the start. Difficult vowels. Yeah, and let's see if I missed anything. No, that was pretty much it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I find
It's
this
really cool showing that.
yeah, I find it a really cool collection of things because yes, we can hear there's more regular or subharmonic hybrids, and it would make sense because we have regular creaking, irregular creaking. We also have regular grunt, as well as less regular grunt, right? So the regularity is just another variation within the effect, but not the defining aspect. So that's really cool to hear. I think I have accidentally gotten regular subharmonic hybrids in operatic contexts before. When I was shaping my vocal tract in a way that had a low larynx, a very constricted epilarynx, so both dark and bright at the same time, chiaroscuro, and then was going slightly beyond the volume limit of that setting. So sometimes we can get super thick, super loud, and in CVT terms, fuller metallic operatic sounds, also in the high range. But it's tricky because as we're not relying on a shouty vowel like an overdrive, or on a typical edge setting where you also have a more constricted pharynx, full metal is only achievable if we have a very precise resonance tuning, at least in my experience. The difference between whether I successfully and efficiently, sustainably get the loudest possible operatic high notes. I cannot be loud today because it's the weekend, but the difference is as small as versus. That's the difference. And if my vowel is slightly off, either a bit too open or a bit too closed or whatever, and if I don't hit a very precise tuning, everything goes to shit. My vocal folds lose metal, they come together less harshly, and I see a parallel here to you saying that if you push into overdrive, it quickly goes to a pushed fry, or something pushed and inefficient anyways, whereas if you do it in a curbing setting, that's no problem. And what I have gotten, I think accidentally, is I've fallen into a curbing setting or a reduced metallic thing, intending to achieve a full thing. So, instead of a more centered kind of setting like that, I get more of that kind of breakup there. And I've gotten that in the high range at high volumes, which sounds pretty cool, and makes me want to write opera with vocal effects. But that's interesting. I have 3 more images to share. I don't want to say it's going to be a wrap-up because, you know, knowing me and knowing all of you, I can totally see us diverging from that again. But I have 3 summaries on my channel that I published a bit less than 2 years ago. And I think it would be fun to complete those with today's findings. So the first one we have is this Fry-Screamin registration chart. We talked a lot about registration. We talked about overdrive versus curbing, fuller metal versus reduced metal, no tilt versus thyroid tilt. And I think when we talk about full chest voice overdrive, full metal, we're talking about this one. And when we talk about a tilted position, would fit into this category, right? And you know, these are subjective. As soon as we start talking about mix, there's many opinions on that. But if we just put curbing, reduced density, reduced metal into this category here, then we could say that your successful lighter hybrid comes from here. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So maybe we could have a hybrid here. Now the question is, what is the difference between pushing into this register and ending up here, kind of in between of the medium fry and the pushed fry, and ending up in a hybrid? What's the difference between getting a pushed medium and a hybrid?
On the takes where my hybrid is not comfortable, where it's pushed. I often do the mistake of just increasing how much air I lose, going going that motion. So going into a pushed direction. Whereas on the takes that are successful and feel very efficient, I lose more air than the normal clean phonation, but I don't approach it as I breathe out more, I lose more air, but I approach it as I raise pressure, I go louder. And that for me is a big distinction of whether do I sing something and now consciously try to push out more air, or whether I do something and I'm a little too loud for that thing. So maybe the distinction is in how much air are we losing? Are we just losing a little bit more air because that is the phonation that we're in? Or am I actively going into push? I try to expel more air. As a contrast of just for the coordination that I'm in, I have too much pressure. I'm too loud.
Cool. Do you think that it makes sense to differentiate this kind of in-between position from a hybrid, or would it be more feasible to just say this is one kind of hybrid and somehow it found its way into the fry stream and registration chart?
You mean with the push fry or with now number 6?
No, your efficient hybrid. Because I can do a sound like this. It sounds very similar to a hybrid, but it feels a bit pushy. It's not as pushed as the pure push fry. It's not, immediately damaging, but it seems that your hybrid is just as sustainable as all the beautiful, colorful fry streams that have been well defined before. So the question is, this number 6 that so far has only gotten question mark instead of a name, could that be a hybrid?
I think what I do can be put into there, but there's also a reason why it's so close to pushed and the color red. From what Matt told us and from what Corinna told us, it's very easy to do it inefficiently. And maybe it's even per se a tad inefficient compared to a medium fry or just a normal grunt, right? You remember we had this discussion about, okay, I can only do it for maybe 30 minutes and then I notice fatigue. Is that a result of technique imperfections because it is so close to pushed? Or is it more close to what you described as number 6 is a bit inefficient and thus we can do it for a little longer? It's still a bit inefficient though. I'd say the spot number 6 for what I do makes sense, but I'm not sure about what Corinna is doing because she is describing it as, I feel it as falsetto. That hers also sounds more airy, I think, than what I do. So and also Arnaud, right, with his I am in between, I'm not between and but I'm in between. I'm in between these, right? Where would we need to put that on this chart?
So we have this thing left, but this is defined as in between of and not the super big break. Not this break, right? But a smaller one. So the question is, does it fit in there? Corinna, when you say you feel yours is head voice spaced, is it above head voice in terms of energy level? And if so, is it in between of head voice and a mix or head voice and a full chest? Sorry, that was 3 questions.
I'm confused.
Is your hybrid scream that you feel as basically a high-pitched version of false chord, is that one energy level above your stable, clean falsetto or head voice? Or is it below in terms of energy level?
No, above, I would say.
And if it's above your head voice, what's the next stable, clean energy level? Is it a heady mix or is it a full chest voice? What is your hybrid in between of?
Oh my God. Well, I think I can go, I can sing in my head voice with a stronger energy level if I go really in this opera setting, yeah. But this is not the tone I have with a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Can you maybe try going from a head voice to your hybrid and then beyond that? What's the logical consequence of going the way from head voice to hybrid twice as far? If you feel that it's just going to be a more pushy version of the hybrid, don't do it. But with fry screams, I feel that, if I do this one here, number 1, basic fry, I can either under-energize my falsetto or my M2, or I can over-energize my whistle, my M3, and I can end up in the same place, hence the arrows from different directions to the same spot, right? The question is, could your hybrid be this one? That would be almost too beautiful if Marcel's is this and yours is this, and then every number has its name, right? Could it be this one, or do you say no, it has nothing to do with this heady mix? It's really a big leap from a pure head voice to a pure hey chest voice. Can you try that once? Can you try what your hybrid is in between of?
Okay, if I get it correctly. Like this?
Cool. What did you do? Can you describe it?
Well, I think I started like in a mixed voice. It was not a clear head voice, more in a mixed one. Then I just jumped into my so-felt false chord, yeah. And then I just hold back the air again, and then this noisy sound dropped off, and I could jump into the head voice right as well.
Cool. How did you go from your mix to your hybrid? What was the action? What part of your body was going in and what was going out? What was going higher, lower?
When my stomach was going in, like pushing my diaphragm up, and like a bit more, I tightened my throat a little bit more.
Okay, so you increased your pressure and your resistance.
Yes.
But apparently you didn't increase both at the same rate, otherwise you would have just gotten a louder, clean noise. So, did you feel that in comparison to your clean mixed voice, the hybrid has more resistance or less?
More.
How is your airflow? Is the airflow higher or lower?
It's higher.
So now we have a contradiction here. We feel more resistance, but we do have a higher flow.
I think when Corinna did the change from the hybrid to her operatic head voice, I think a similar thing happened to what Aliki critiqued earlier with Arno. Too many things changed at the same time. Placement changed, energy level changed, resistance changed. So it wasn't really I change one parameter and this is, okay, so this is what it's close to, but I want to get to this coordination and now I'll change all parameters necessary to end up in that clean, the clean operatic head voice. I think an interesting, or I heard inside, I think I heard curbing. when she was in the hybrid. Corinna, can you show us what happens when you stay on the pitch that you have with your hybrid? So that kind of, and then you reduce energy though, but keep everything else the same.
Let me try.
It's in curbing.
Yeah,
Pretty certain
well,
it's
then.
what I was describing. Yeah, for a moment we could hear you be metallic. For a moment we could hear, we could hear that, and then you you lost the metal and went to that.
I think
So
so
it's
too.
not in Tony's chart. It's at the same spot that I have. I would say it's a over-energized curbing.
Cool, and that makes sense from here on. Now, I'm going to provide a little example of this one here, and then we can just quickly say, is it a hybrid or not? And if it's not a hybrid, this chart has nothing to do with it. And if it is, I know what my next YouTube video will look like. Let's see if I find it. I gotta search for a cooler texture. Give me a minute. What about this one?
Yeah, this sounds like grunt. Do you lose air really fast?
Medium fast.
Okay, so a bit faster than.
Similar, I'd say.
This? Yeah.
But it's interesting. You
I
hear
think
a grunt.
yeah.
I feel a creaking. We have our hybrid. That's it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Is that?
I think.
Yeah,
it's
pushing into head voice. This feels like what I do for my hybrid, but one register down.
perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It's really, the funny thing is, this is just as hard to have it not be pushed.
Yeah.
With every take that I try right now,
Yeah.
I'm this close to being pushy, and every other take feels pushed and uncomfortable. So it's really maybe about this higher than usual airflow that is maybe just risky or very close to now the airflow is too high for what we're doing. So this feels just as close to pushed and uncomfortable as mine and Corinna's and mine hybrid. Yeah.
Very interesting. So according to this chart now, we could say, work hypothesis, that hybrids exist here and here.
You could
Maybe also, sorry.
Yeah. You could make the distinction. I was thinking of two arrows. So one arrow with tendency for more airflow, and that this would lead us to hybrid, and one arrow down, or kind of this way, tendency of less airflow, of holding back, which would lead us to creaking. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? What do you think about that?
Could be possible. I think if you're talking about airflow, it would be time to show the following. This one, this airflow chart of all vocal effects defined so far. We have less airflow and more airflow. And we have, exhale on the right side and inhale techniques on the left side. If we focus on the exhale techniques, we have various kinds of splitting, creaking and grunt, and as we see, not nearly as many in-betweens, not nearly as high of a resolution as in the splitting section. So it would be interesting to see if maybe somewhere here the margins of creaking grunt could be called hybrid, as well as grunt presenting as creaking or as variations of fry scream, and creaking or fry screams presenting as grunt or false chord screams, right? Could it be that this section here is where our hybrid lives in terms of airflow? Or would you say there's examples where we have extremely low airflow and a hybrid also needs to live here? For example, the 35-second screams that we've heard before. Is that a good place for a hybrid, or has it nothing to do with absolute amount of airflow?
I kind of think, I feel like we're talking about two different kinds of hybrids, right? And like I was about to say basically what you just said, right? It seems like there is a hybrid between creaking and grunt, and then there's let's just say like fry and false chord hybrid kind of thing going on as well. But I think the reason I'm starting to think about the creaking and grunt hybrid right now is because Corinna describes hers as feeling like head voice based, falsetto based, and that was like the path I took to find mine. But it still sound, and maybe it's just her audio, the audio quality. I'm not hearing her hybrid right, but it sounds to me like what she and Marcel are doing are still different somehow, and what she and I are doing are still different somehow, but they're closely related somewhere, because like my path to finding my hybrid there started with me taking my false chord and like making it kind of it got closer to falsetto, so it would be like I was trying to emulate a band called Boundaries, and their vocalist has like a really chunky false chord scream, but like the voice behind it kind of starts to get like this. It starts to get like this, and it gets a little higher, and then and now it's close to falsetto, right? So it just, it kind of gets into that area, and that starts to feel really falsetto-y, but that wasn't, so that's how I got close to what I have, but then there was still like something else that needed to happen to make it like what it is and give it that different sound.
So maybe we have these three kinds of hybrids. We have the actual hybrid somewhere here in terms of just the airflow of the vocal fold bases. And then we have normal fry screams, whether it's hyper compressed or basic or medium, presenting as something like this without the airflow necessarily becoming much bigger. And we have grunt or false chord scream presented as something like this without the airflow necessarily becoming much less. So I think we have hybrids in three places. We have the actual hybrid somewhere here, and then if we include those into the definition of hybrid, a lot of fry scream can make hybrids, and a lot of grunt or false chord scream can also make for a hybrid. So now question is, what's the more useful lens depending on the context? If we see this chart, it only really makes sense visually to include the hybrid and not so much the versions that lean towards false chord or fry. But if we look at this chart, it looks perfect here. And I have a third one. I have this one. That's the three main kinds of vocal fold based effects, glottic effects or glottal effects, that I have differentiated for the last couple of years. If we say that any fry scream will be irregular creaking based, maybe projected creaking based if it's pitched, but let's go with irregular, that it can have extra aspects maybe of fry splitting, as we've heard in our nose examples, but generally that splitting is not a defining factor of it, and that all false chord screams are irregular grunt based. And theoretically, we need to include hybrid, just the hybrid. The vocal fold phonation that's distinctly different from any kind of creaking or any kind of grunt. That can be both regular or irregular, as we've heard, based on Marcel's clips. I think.
Yeah. What I'm thinking about is your addition of projected in creaking being necessary because we want to differentiate, and not as complex as basic, medium, and maybe pushed, but maybe just between what is somewhat metallic or coming from a metallic context. Whoa! And what is just whoa.
Yeah.
And maybe it makes sense to make this distinction for grunt as well. And
okay. Now, is a projected grunt a hybrid, or is there a projected grunt that is not a hybrid, and is there also a projected hybrid then?
I was thinking of projected being just a simplification of it is in a somewhat metallic context and not in neutral. Right, not coming from that. And then the assessment, because this chart is not an assessment of style, but just an assessment of vocal fold behavior. And when we talk about maybe grunt-based hybrid and fry-based hybrid, these terms do not fit with this chart because they are more genre or what do we hear?
Yeah.
Right? So saying when we have projected grunt, would that be a hybrid? Yes, it could if a listener would hear it as something that sounds like fry, but it is actually grunt.
So a projected grunt would be a false chord dominant hybrid, no?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So where is our fry dominant hybrid here?
I think the audios of Joseph gave us kind of the most disagreements, right? I would make the argument if it's creaking based, then we could call it a type of projected irregular, projected and irregular creaking. Yeah, in a sense, when it's something like, right, that. You could call it, it's projected because, see, now I can't.
We do have a more metallic
well,
setting, but I can hear that, yes.
Yeah, but we have a more metallic setting. We are not in, we're not this. We are there. And so in that regard, it would be projected.
Okay, what now differentiates normal projected creaking, or let's say medium fry, which is a more atonal version of projected creaking? What differentiates that from a fry dominant hybrid? What's the main difference between these in terms of airflow, air pressure, resistance, shaping maybe?
I think when we're talking about a fry dominant hybrid, we're talking about something that is creaking or creaking based, but that presents as a false chord scream. So that already gives us a lot of cues into how it would need to be shaped. Right? Dark sound color, kind of typical maybe guttural shape, lower pitch, at least quite a lot lower than what we would expect from a fry scream. And this would make the most difference between just we have a projected creaking and we have a fry dominant hybrid. So we have a projected creaking that is also colored really dark, that likely to be able to creak needs compression or hypercompression even, and we're on a much lower pitch.
Cool. I have another thought, namely regular and irregular. Those categories that we have in creaking and grunt but not splitting, they refer to acoustics. So regular means subharmonic, and irregular means noisy or not decisive in terms of subharmonic. Projected kind of falls out of that category because it suddenly refers to intensity. And splitting obviously cannot be regular or irregular because splitting is defined to be polyphonic. So now the question is this whole thing a reasonable structure or is it not? Maybe we should say there's polyphonic creaking, so Fry-based splitting, if you will. And this one, for example, would go here. And there's splitting that has incomplete closure, like air splitting or the hypercompressed version of it. You know, there's also hypercompressed creaking. We just rarely hear it in isolation, so it's not in this chart of true-fold only based effects, right? Bubble splitting is a bubbly sound that has a lot of airflow too. Grunt splitting is basically a grunt with random polyphonic pitches. Let's see if I can get a good demo. I cannot get a good demo now, but there's a good demo in this video. Rough Vocal Effects Revisited, episode 4. Anyway, bubble and grunt splitting could be subcategories of polyphonic grunt, and we wouldn't need the splitting category as its own. I don't do that. So far, I have thought about it before, and I think it makes much more sense to go for a visually simple structure, comparatively simple, I admit. We have creaking, splitting, and grunt. But the more consistent version would be to say splitting as a polyphonic version of either creaking or grunt. Or hybrid, maybe. So that splitting is not inherently one of these main categories, but that creaking, hybrid, and grunt are main categories, and splitting is the name we give any polyphonic variation of either of these effects. Any thoughts on that?
Can I ask for a demo of irregular grunt of what that would sound like?
Sounds like a beginner's false chord scream.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I have a perfect video example of an irregular grunt and true fold only grunt with no false folds, no written notes, no superglottic extra. Here on the CVT research side. Could you hear that?
Yes. Okay.
So, once again, no false fold approximation even. I don't see any other wiggling that could phonate. So, what we see at the right here is irregular vocal fold phonation, and we see a lot of airflow. You know, this here means air is coming out. So that is a pure vocal fold grunt, irregular.
Mm-hmm. So it would be this, right? Like, right, that thing.
Yes, with
Roughly.
the difference that in the beginning yours wanted to go regular, and
Yes.
we had a bit of an octave there. So that's it's
okay.
not the most useful distinction really, because very rarely will people use a sound like this, or even the beginner's false chord in their music. At least you won't hear it on Spotify. But you know, the question is always if we start differentiating regular and irregular creaking, because that is a useful distinction in most practical contexts, like regular creaking, nothing's gonna harm you, jazz, versus irregular creaking, which you could base a fry scream on, metal, um, that is stylistically useful. In Grunt, you could argue nobody needs the regular version, at least in 95% of music, and rarely do people use even just the pure vocal fold based irregular version of it. But then, we're always caught in between of how much more can we simplify until it becomes a bad model versus how much more accurate can we be until it becomes too complicated. So the compromise I've gone for in my 2023 version is to say we have creaking, splitting, and grunt, because those are perceptually very different qualities. But maybe in the light of how hybrid has mixed up everything, it would also be an option to say that splitting is polyphonic creaking or polyphonic grunt or polyphonic hybrid, and hybrid is the actual third vocal fold effect, judging anatomically in terms of airflow.
Within your category of splitting, does your splitting exclude diplophonia?
I think splitting is diplophonia.
So if you just have a relatively plain diplophonic event with two distinct pitches,
like this?
yeah, because then it doesn't make sense to exclude splitting in its entirety as a category. It has to remain.
Why does it have to remain? Because it's a distinctly different airflow from creaking?
Yeah.
So is it maybe just a polyphonic hybrid?
It's a distinct airflow and a distinct glottal behavior. Which then would mean that depending on the type of splitting or depending on the type of sound that a human being wants to make, both models are functional lies, like they're useful, so it's not necessarily worth binning the previous model. It's worth just creating two versions and be like, hey, depending on how your brain functions, one or the other might work nicely for you.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I've tried to do is always to give possible lenses, and this is the reason these videos are so long. They don't say this is what it is like, they say this is what you could say it is like. But yeah, I like the idea of saying, well, splitting still deserves its place at the table because very likely it is asymmetry based, whereas creaking and grunt are, well, chaos if it's irregular, and complexity but not asymmetry if it's regular. So maybe that would be a good argument for 4 distinct glottal categories, and an argument in favor of my little inconsistency in terms of whether I define stuff acoustically or anatomically, right? So, I have one last example I want to show you. We agree that this one that you just saw is grunt. Now, if we listen to the male examples of the same effect, called grunt in CVT, as a big container for pure two-fold grunt, complex, in combination with supraglottic effects, false chord scream. What's this? What's the male example? Oh! Is that a false chord scream, or does that qualify as a hybrid? Because I do hear oh, a metallic setting.
Yeah, I hear that too. Yeah.
For me, that's a hybrid.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So according to CVT, hybrid fits in the grunt category. And I think we would actually call it grunt dominant hybrid, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So grunt dominant hybrid is a grunt. Fry dominant hybrid is weird creaking. And hybrid is hybrid. Cool. Is that a conclusion?
Possibly,
I think
yes.
it's-
I have one thought. My weird one thought is, okay, this might be something that no one can relate to, but when the arioepiglottic fold starts flubbering about, passively or whatever, actively, however one wants to perceive it in the wind, there's this thing where it can either not be particularly flexed, in which case it's not moving in the wind, then you flex it to a certain degree and it flubbers around in the wind, but then you can flex it further in order to stabilize it and stop it from flubbering around in the wind. And I'm wondering, in relation to approximation and muscular activation of the false vocal folds when it's a Fry-based hybrid, if we're trying to find that sweet medium spot where it's kind of like it's semi-flexed or flexed, and if it flexes too much, it stabilizes everything, it stops vibrating, you end up in, is it your pushed Fry? That's the click beyond in your categorization? Yeah. So you end up in your pushed Fry because now we've flexed too far and now it's not flubbering in the wind anymore and it's stabilized. And it's that weird space where it's very difficult to find the air pressure, because if you pressurize it too much, you might stabilize it. If you don't pressurize it enough, they're not going to approximate sufficiently. And depending on how much you're pressurizing it, they might also behave oddly, making it uncomfortable and not sustainable for long periods of time. Or if you get the flow right and you get the pressure right, super sustainable and yay, everyone's happy, but fuck me if we can find that easily. That's my thought.
So do you mean that if we're in this kind of Schrödinger's cat of either vibrating or stabilizing, we're also in a Schrödinger's cat of what is our resistance? How much back pressure do we have? And how does that affect the vocal fold phonation?
Yeah, because I tend to think of like a weird triangle of pressure, resistance, and then muscular relaxation, which is
Which
super
muscles?
weird. Stereotypically on the glottal level, so on the level of the true vocal folds specifically. Yay.
Air pressure, resistance, and relaxation.
Yeah.
Relaxation resulting in less resistance.
Depends. So let's say if I'm doing a breath dominant movement, I want to, for lack of a better way to phrase it, I want to flex, let's say, so that I stay on pitch, because otherwise I'm just going to drop and I'm going to overblow. But I also need the edges to flubber around so that the breath can pass through and I can get my weird like stuff going on. If I'm thinking of Fry, I need to flex differently. I need to approximate more closely, but then I need the body, like the edges of it, to start becoming flubbery. So fundamentally, I need to relax differently and I need to flex differently depending on what I want to happen at the glottal level. Did that make sense? Please
Yes.
tell me that made sense.
It makes sense, but so the resistance only stays the same if in compensation for one relaxation there's another flex happening. And I mean, we know this from clean singing. There's several ways to regulate pitch. I can regulate pitch in a way that keeps my volume consistent if I share my Audacity, the most professional DAW. right, like that, I didn't become much louder, but my pitch did increase because I did not rely on more pressure in order to increase my pitch. I relied on stretching and thinning out my vocal folds via thyroid tilt, as discussed previously. But now if I do I don't even have to go as high. I already exponentially increased my volume because my pressure increased and was met by the also increasing resistance of my more isometrically tense vocal folds. Okay, they stay short and thick, and it's basically a question of, do the vocal folds behave like a rubber band that you stretch and then get higher vibrations from, or does it behave like a flubbery hand versus a fist? The fist didn't really take more space. You could argue it took less space. It was more condensed. But it was harder to, get by that fist. So, yes, this same idea of, well, in German functional schools, they have that idea of mass versus tension dominance. It is similar to the concept of TA versus CT dominance. We just know that TA versus CT dominance is too good to be true. But mass versus tension dominance, I believe, is one of the better ideas. So maybe we also have mass dominant and tension dominant vocal fold behaviors in screaming. That's not the conclusion. That can't possibly be the conclusion.
And then the room died. No, because I was just thinking that if we're thinking of false vocal folds approximating and flubbering in the wind, but then the pressure, let's say, for lack of a better word, stabilizing them again, it would make sense that the hybrids would exist at spot 6 in between as well in terms of false vocal fold behavior. That.
Cool. So we have several new lenses to view hybrid and vocal fold phonation in general through after today. I thank all of you very much. And I'm also very much looking forward to the research we're going to do in Grenoble next month with Arnaud, Marcel, Aliki, and possibly more people. And we'll get new information from that very hopefully. We'll see what many of the sounds that we've heard today look like. At least, in the context of being observed with the camera, either through the mouth or the nose, which always changes the way we do things, but it's the best we can do. And with that, I'd say that was our hybrid panel discussion. Thank you for joining in. And thanks everyone on YouTube for watching.
Thanks for invitation.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. It was really nice and well moderated. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks. Good evening to everyone.
Bye.